this afternoon, we got the news that Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors have agreed to a new contract extension. The news broke from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski just over an hour ago, and it was announced that the Warriors and Steph Curry have agreed on a 1-year, $62.6 million contract extension that will keep him under contract through 2026-27 season. So this is a little bit strange timing here, considering the fact that Curry is already under contract through 2026. So for this to come out now of all times is a little bit peculiar, but I'm sure we're going to get more details as to what the reasoning there was. But that being said, there has been a lot of conversation this offseason about what the future of the Warriors looks like, because they're coming off of a few disappointing seasons. Now, did win a playoff series against the Kings in 2023, but other than that, they have been a play-in team in each of the past few years, including even that season where they were ultimately able to knock off the Kings before losing to the Lakers in the second round. That it seems like there is a little bit of an impasse because Steph Curry is still one of the best basketball players in the world. We already knew that, but then especially so coming off of the Olympics that we just saw and him having those masterful closeout performances in the final two games for Team USA. The pressure's on for the Warriors a little bit to build a contender around him. Curry this past season averaged 26 points per game. We know that he can still shoot with the best of them. Efficiency was down a tick, but at the same time, you're still getting 41% shooting splits from a lead guard on very high efficiency. So very hard to complain about that. And ultimately, the issue for the Warriors is not whether or not Steph Curry has the legs to carry a team forwards. It's more so about this idea of, does he have the teammates that he can consistently rely upon? And the answer this past season was he does not. Now, this is for a couple different issues. Obviously, Klay Thompson, very well documented that he struggled this past season, and he ends up going to Dallas, so a little bit of a new era already in Golden State, but on that same term of new era, they have a lot of young players that are getting heavy minutes for them now. We've seen these past few years, really since the turn, I would say, of 2020 or so, especially following the departure of Kevin Durant, the Warriors have been trying to run a little bit of a two timelines sequence where they have all of their older players, their established vets, while also bringing up the younger core. And ultimately, they were able to win a championship in 2022. It was very clear, though, during that year that it was far more about the veterans than the young players, and they haven't been able to develop and contribute to winning basketball out of the gates the way that the Warriors were hoping. James Wiseman ultimately ended up being a bust for them. They've had some other players as well that have gotten marginal minutes. We've seen, especially so these past couple seasons, guys like Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody getting more minutes. This past year, Brandon Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis took on significantly larger roles for them. And I think that ultimately you got pretty good production from them, all things considered, and you would think that they are going to be able to continue to take the next steps, which is great. But that being said, you now have Steph Curry locked up for another 3 full seasons, and I think that ultimately they're going to need to kind of do Steph justice, where to some degree I mean, it's possible. We've seen it in the past. Most recently, the exact argument I would sort of look to is with the Los Angeles Lakers and Kobe Bryant during his last handful of years. It was almost more of a retirement tour than anything else, that they were trying to just make sure that they could, establish his legacy with the Lakers, give him his proper goodbye. But it wasn't a healthy couple seasons for the Lakers during that time. So not a strategy I would be looking to replicate. Maybe you look at the Dallas years as well with Dirk Nowitzki and sort of how he was going out there. But the difference between those situations and I feel like what's going on right now with the Warriors is that Steph Curry is actually healthy. Kobe had his torn Achilles, I believe it was, and was really in 2012-ish, 2013, and really wasn't the same after that. Dirk Nowitzki was just sort of running on fumes at that point. Steph Curry just showed the entire world just about a month ago how dominant of a basketball player he still is when he is feeling himself. And that's not something I think the Warriors can, technically they can afford to just let it play out and have Steph be the ultimate warrior for all time. But that being said, it kind of feels like they need to be a little bit more aggressive than that in order to actually give this team a chance to win. Because while I definitely have said multiple times throughout this show that I'm not very confident in the Warriors being able to flip everything around in one off season and become championship contenders once again, the fact of the matter is, when you have Steph Curry, the window, and when he's playing healthy, it doesn't feel like the window is ever fully closed. So, again, talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here in terms of, do I have high expectations for them competing for finals throughout the remainder of Curry's contract? No, but maybe if the Warriors got a little bit more aggressive, you could start to talk yourself into it. Ultimately, it's going to come down to how do they want to manage their young assets, because the Warriors are one of the few franchises, I would say, in recent history that has championship expectations, that is hoping to be among the best in the league, and yet have somehow managed to do so without giving up any of their future draft capital. And that comes from them drafting, of course, very well, hitting on the picks of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and doing enough stuff along the margins. But at this point, the Warriors have to make a decision on whether or not they want to play out this two timelines thing. And it also takes evaluation from within if they legitimately think that Jonathan Kuminga can develop into an all-star caliber player, or if Brandon Podziemski, I don't know about all-star just yet at least, but somebody who could, he might have even made an all-defensive team last year. I can double check on that. I feel like that's probably pretty aggressive for year one. I'm pretty definitive that he didn't, but Brandon Podziemski is somebody that could definitely be in the conversation of all defense moving forward here. I believe he led the league in charges drawn last season. So, and Trayce Jackson-Davis, kind of came into the season with a chip on his shoulder after dropping all the way into the 50s on draft day in 2023, but a very active rebounder and solid touch in the paint that, he's a positive impact player, I would argue. And again, you can like all of these young players, but liking them and liking what they could be is a different conversation than will they be able to contribute to finals and playoff minutes in the now. And that's where I start to have a little bit more doubts about where the Warriors are currently at, and I think that they have a lot of room to grow in that department. One of the biggest concerns for me, and again, I like Trayce Jackson-Davis, I think he's a very promising young player, was one of the top guys going into Indiana, played his sophomore season, again, maybe a little bit disappointing, but ultimately lands in a very nice situation, and that's awesome that the Warriors got this steal. But is Trayce Jackson-Davis going to be a starter on a championship competitor in these next couple seasons? I would very highly doubt that. So I think he's somebody that is expendable. I know he's a position of need, but you kind of need to upgrade there. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Andrew Wiggins. Is he some type of a reclamation project where he's had some off the court stuff these past couple years, more personal matters, not legal wise? Know that off the court can be a pretty broad statement there, but Wiggins, if he can just sort of get to a point mentally where he was in 2022, he was unbelievable for them that season and sort of finally seemed like he was becoming the player that everybody was hoping he was when he went number one overall a decade ago. But at this point, it's just been so hit or miss with him. I'm not sure how much trust you can instill into him. Maybe it's possible the Warriors have a better read than anybody at this point, considering he's in their building. But he's got a big contract attached to his name, and I know that he is a negative asset at this point, but one thing that he definitely is a contract that can match up with some other really impactful players that if the Warriors ever wanted to, and I don't think this is a deal that makes sense for them, but actually scratch that. Let's go to the Lauri Markkanen trade that ultimately didn't pan out. Markkanen is no longer eligible to be traded, but I'm just saying, for example, a player like that, you could probably trade Wiggins and a couple of their young pieces. I also really like Moses Moody, somebody that I just really enjoyed watching him play in college, and I'm not ready to give up on him. He's had some moments in the NBA, but trading Wiggins and some of those younger pieces to get an established star. I think that, again, Lauri is no longer available. I wouldn't go the Brandon Ingram route myself, but I'm just saying players like that, something that could be interesting. A team that I've constantly been talking about the idea of I would love to see these two teams make a trade are the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. I really like Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley as individual players. I don't love their fits next to one another, though. And I think that Jarrett Allen does not get enough credit from the casual NBA fan as to how impactful he can be, especially on that defensive side of the ball. Add to that the fact that he's on, the upper echelon of screeners in the game. He's a good lob threat. He's someone that I think could really be fun to watch play alongside Steph Curry. My issue with that I always come back to as well is how would his spacing with Draymond Green be any better than what Cleveland has right now? I know it's not perfect, but I'm just talking this out here. And by the way, in this trade as well, I'd love it as well because the Cavaliers could get somebody forward maybe like a Jonathan Kuminga that would definitely help them as they've been searching for a 3 for years. But again, not a perfect trade. I'm just saying that I think there are moves that are on the table for the Warriors, and I'm just curious how they are going to choose to play this because, again, you lock down Curry through his age 38 season. At that point, can't imagine a smaller guard. Who knows? Again, Steph Curry, definitely don't want to put any limitations on him, but somebody that I could see him probably hanging it up around 38 years old. So, I don't know. We will have to see, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section, what your initial reactions were, because this was a bit of a surprise news story that broke, again, just an hour or so ago. But we are now going to be moving on here and diving into the New England Patriots officially naming a starting quarterback in Jacoby Brissett. So we'll talk about what that sort of means in the short term, as well as balancing that with the long-term outlook for New England as they had just drafted Drake May 3rd overall. We'll talk about sort of what factors led into this decision and its impact. But before we do so, we have to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.